Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Do you love your insurance company? Are you a fan? It's a fun example that likely gets no for an answer. But what brands are you a fan of, and how do those companies treat you? Are they providing you something of value for free, or just another sales pitch that you don't want to hear? And I'm a big fan of today's guest. David Meerman Scott is a marketing strategist, entrepreneur, advisor to emerging companies, VC strategic partner, and best-selling author of 10 books, including The New Rules of Marketing and PR, and also Fanocracy, Turning Fans into Customers and Customers into Fans. And one of the coolest things in the world to me is that he also speaks at Tony Robbins' Business Mastery courses. And on this episode, we'll discuss Fanocracy, the newer rules of PR and marketing, Presidents Trump and Obama, Deadheads, Harry Potter, The Humble Selfie, Human Connections and Fans, Influencers, Employee Engagement, a plane literally taking an emergency landing after hitting geese, Tony Robbins, J-Lo, Shakira, and a lot more. So let's tune in to Deadhead and superfan David Meerman Scott with me, the Super Shark, on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. David, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. So for the two people in the world who haven't bought one of your books or don't know who you are in the marketing world, would you give a quick background on your story and your career to date?
Of course. Great to be here, Shark. So
Thank you.
I started in the bond markets. I was a trader on Wall Street. I was absolutely horrible at it.
Yeah.
But that was a good thing because I found that what I really loved was the information side.
Mm.
So I worked for companies for about 15 years, like Dow Jones and Reuters, delivering real-time information to the bond markets. And then in 2002, I lost my job. I was fired by Thomson Reuters. And I recognized that all of the knowledge that I had about real-time information was exactly what was happening in the world of marketing. So I started writing and speaking about this idea of now, some people call it content marketing or inbound marketing or, digital marketing, whatever you want to call it. Started writing and speaking about that. My book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, originally came out in 2007, now 400,000 copies in
Mm.
English and 29 other languages. And I've done 11 books in total. But as I was thinking about where the world of marketing is going,
Hmm.
I realized that we've gone too far. The pendulum has swung too far in the direction of superficial online communications at a time when people are hungry for true human connection. So, for the past 5 years, I've been studying the idea of human connection, and I'm sure we'll talk about that
Yeah.
more over the next few minutes.
So the New Rules of Marketing PR, I think I bought it when it was the third edition and then got another copy. I didn't even know you'd written 6 or 7 updates on it. But when you look back, I think one of the things that first put me onto it, a mutual friend of ours, Ann Hanley, mentioned that you are one of her favorite marketing minds out there, which is high
Oh,
praise,
nice.
especially coming from Ann. But you
Yeah, Anne is awesome.
yeah. So when you look back at that particular book, how do you update the New Rules of Marketing PR to stay within that mindset and stay true to focus? I mean, obviously, marketing has evolved tremendously. Agree with your
Right.
shifts completely with your perceptual shifts, but how do you keep that core focus with the new rules to where it is today?
Yeah, and I'm actually working on a new edition, which will become the seventh edition. Working on that now.
When does it become
So
the
when,
newer rules? When's
yeah,
that the next
exactly.
book?
The new I'm glad I didn't say the new rules because
Yeah.
I would have had to add seven on the end there. I first was writing the new rules of marketing and PR way back in 2005 and 2006. Back then, Twitter didn't exist.
Yeah.
Facebook was only for students. YouTube had just launched. Instagram, Snapchat, and a whole bunch of other tools didn't exist. So every edition I focus firstly on what are the new tools that are around, or what are the new techniques that are around that I need to talk about for reaching people in an online world. I also look for examples that are current. What are some interesting things going on right now? Companies I can cite, examples that I can cite. I'm a huge fan of the US presidential election cycle,
Hmm.
and I always analyze the marketing aspects of the presidential election cycle. So early editions, it was, why did Barack Obama get elected president? The most recent edition, why did Donald Trump get elected? And now I'm already working on who might get elected in 2000 or reelected in 2016 and why. And it's always a marketing reason. But what's interesting is that the overall strategies have never changed in the 14 or 15 years since I first started writing these ideas, because the old rules of marketing, as I talk about them, are that you had to buy attention with advertising, or you had to beg the media for attention,
Hmm.
to write or broadcast about you, or you had to knock on doors one at a time, bugging people one at a time for attention. But we can create content that can help us to generate attention. It's really, that's not changed, and that probably won't change. But what is changing is the tools and the strategies. So for the newest edition that I'm working on right now, there's an entire chapter on artificial intelligence
Hmm.
and marketing, and how AI and machine learning is an important part of marketing. And that wasn't even something on anybody's radar until quite recently. So I need to be current and keep the book current going forward.
Well, don't forget to add a new chapter on the fake news.
Yeah. I did use the term fake news a few times, actually. It is an interesting phenomenon.
Well, it'd be lovely to see how it's translated in Russian. What what it
There
means.
is a Russian version, as a matter of fact,
Is there really?
but not since that that whole scandal.
Well, so your new book, Fanocracy, Turning Fans into Customers and Customers into Fans. What was the impetus and inspiration for that book?
So, about 5 years ago, I was thinking, what's next? Because I always try to look forward into what's happening. And, the whole idea around the new rules of marketing and PR 15 years ago, as I was writing it, was I had this crystal clear idea in my mind that marketing was about content creation, hugely important. And I'm like, it was just a pattern in the universe that no one else was seeing, that I was seeing. Then a few years later, 5 years later ish, I also saw a pattern that no one else was seeing, and that was that marketing was going real time. So I invented a concept called newsjacking,
Hmm.
which is how in real time you create a piece of content to generate interest. Twitter was becoming important. I wrote a book called Real Time Marketing and PR. So
Hmm.
that was another idea around some pattern in the universe that I didn't think anybody else was seeing. So about 5 years ago, I was thinking, there's a pattern in the universe I'm noticing that I don't think very many other people are noticing. And number one, it was the pattern that people were beginning to get fed up. Now, this is 5 years ago. So at that time, beginning to get fed up, and now it's become way worse, fed up with the idea of superficial online communications. They're fed up with yet another email in their inbox. Many times from companies they do business with, just like trying to get them to buy something
Hmm.
else. You buy something from a company online, and all of a sudden they're sending you 3 or 4 emails a day. It's
Oh,
crazy.
I'm getting it now.
It's amazing. Everyone is. The whole world is. And then, yet another tweet, yet another LinkedIn connection where you say yes to the connection and they immediately turn around and try to sell you something. The whole idea of polarization in the online world, of course, in the political world, we're incredibly polarized. You have us versus them, red versus blue, right versus left. But there's also polarization in many other ways on the internet, and it becoming in some places a dark world. And at the same time, I was talking with my daughter Reiko. She's now 26. So 5 years ago, she's about 21. And I said, I'm thinking about this idea of fandom. The idea of fandom is so interesting to me, I said to my daughter. And I said, what is it with the fact that I've been to 75 Grateful Dead concerts? What is
Hmm.
it with the fact that I've been to 780 live music shows in my life, starting when I was age 15? And she said, "I know, Daddy. I'm such a big fan of Harry Potter." And I knew most of this to be true already, but she said, not only have I read each of the Harry Potter books multiple times, not only have I watched each of the Harry Potter movies multiple times, but I've also gone to Orlando to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter theme park, and I've gone to London to go to the Harry Potter studios. I am a massive fan. And not only that, I wrote a 90,000 word alternative ending to the Harry Potter series, posted on a fan fiction site. It's a story about how Draco Malfoy was a spy for the Order of the Phoenix. And my fan fiction has been downloaded and read thousands of times, and there's hundreds of comments. I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. So we thought, wow, there's something really cool going on here, that on one hand, the internet has become a dark place. And there's so much digital chaos out there. But on another hand, all of us are massive fans of something. And we decided at that moment 5 years ago to collaborate to write a book about fandom. Ultimately, as you said a moment ago, the title became Fanocracy. But we started writing this book, and we interviewed thousands of people about what they're a fan of and why. We talked to neuroscientists. We spoke with a bunch of hundreds of companies that have developed fans, and realized that fandom isn't just for athletes and actors and authors and sports stars anymore. Fandom is for everyone, and every organization has an opportunity to build fans. And the idea of collaborating with my daughter has
Yeah.
been great, because not only are we obviously different genders, and not only are we obviously different generations, I just mentioned to you we share different fandoms, but Reiko is mixed race and she's a scientist. She did a neuroscience degree at Columbia, and she's currently in her final year of medical school. So she is a, young millennial Harry Potter fan, working with me,
Yeah.
who's a white middle-aged dude who loves the Grateful Dead. So we came at it from very different perspectives.
And you presented on stage with her. I saw that
We
picture. I
did,
bet that was
yeah, for the
probably,
first time, and I'm hoping we'll do it more. But we did for the first
yeah.
time, which was
What was
awesome.
what was that like? I mean, for you as a father to see your daughter on stage with you, as
Well,
somebody that speaks
she
at hundreds of conferences a year, and here you've got your pride and joy there with you.
It was fabulous. She knows, obviously, she's grown up with me as a
Yeah.
speaker. I've actually had her attend a couple of my speeches here and there, but and she was fabulously nervous. It was not her thing, right?
Hmm.
So I made it easy for her. I invited her on stage, just asked her a couple of questions, and she did a fabulous job. I think she's like, got off the stage, and a couple minutes later, that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Get me some more speaking gigs, Daddy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
get you some more speaking
Yeah.
gigs. What are you talking about? But it would be fun for us to do more than just that one. And we've got another one that we may be able to do in a couple weeks if she can fit it into her schedule. But being a medical school student, she's not able to travel,
Sure.
unfortunately. So they need to be a local engagement.
Well, she's probably started looking at her Twitter and Instagram follower count, and as soon as she got off the stage. But at least if you go to a conference and somebody goes down, she's prepared to give them CPR or some other life-saving procedure
There's
if
that.
needed.
There's that too. There's that too. But she did. She really actually was like, "Wow, I got off the stage and all these other people I've never heard of started following me." And I go, "Yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
deal."
Yeah. So how do we go about identifying fans as brands? I mean, I know some of this is just looking at your customers differently, but how do you cultivate them as fans?
So there's a number of different prescriptions, and I want to at least talk about a couple of them. But what's really important here, and it's something that I think so many organizations have lost track of, what's really important here is to develop what we call a fanocracy. And I use the word fanocracy, kind of like democracy is the rule of the many, fanocracy is the rule of the fans. An organization who develops fans is inspiring passion among their customers by putting those customers' needs and wishes at the center of everything it does. And that sounds simple. And it's easy for me to be here telling you, oh, yeah, you just put your customers first. But that's truly what we learned when we did the research, that it comes down to thinking about what would be the most important thing in order to put a customer first. And I'll
Mhm.
just give you one example, which ended up actually being a chapter in the book, which we call Give More Than You Have to. And the idea of this is giving a gift with no expectation of anything in return is a great way to
Yeah.
build fans. It's a great way to build fans. And I
Yeah.
learned this actually from the Grateful Dead. So the Grateful Dead famously allows fans to record their concerts, and they have done so for 40 years. You can bring your recording gear into Grateful Dead shows and record the shows. It's just remarkable. You know, every other band says no, it's on the tickets, no recording devices allowed. Grateful Dead says, sure, why not? And what that does is it grows fans because people love. In the old days, it was cassette tapes, but
Mhm.
now, of course, it's MP3 files to share those files. And so, what I've noticed, for example, in the B2B world, is that so many organizations don't do that. In fact, they do the opposite. What they do is they actually create an immense barrier between their customers or potential customers and the company by insisting that people fill out a form before they get a piece of content. So the typical arrangement is a B2B company offers a white paper, and in exchange for the white paper, they demand that you have to fill out a form, including your email address, your name, your company, your job title, sometimes phone numbers, and other sets of data. But that's setting up an adversarial relationship. That's not setting up a relationship that you would set up with a fan, because you're saying to that existing or potential customer, I will not give you something until you give me something first. You give me your email address, then I will give you my white paper. And that's setting up an adversarial relationship. So that's just one simple prescription for this idea of building fans. But the idea is, with everything you do, how can you put your customers first? So that means don't send yet another email unless that is putting the customer first. Who cares if you need to make your sales number this quarter? That's not putting the customer first. And it's really can be a very tough thing for organizations to get their arms around. It's a very simple concept. It's easy to talk about, but it's tough for an organization to get their arms around it.
Well, I get that and understand it completely, but for an organization to understand it, when you say who cares, how does an organization then understand how to take that? And I love this part of the book, by the way. You give out like a 9-step prescriptive ways to build all those, and again, I love that chapter as well. But how do you take an organization to understand that the sales or leads or whatever it is are going to happen because you put that customer first? And I run through this a lot. When you try to, it sounds amazing and it sounds great to put the customer first, but if you say to a client, who cares about the sales this quarter, it freaks them out.
It does freak them out. One thing we've found that's really helpful is to get people talking about what they're a fan of. And in my talks, I actually have a series of questions that are really fun.
Mm-hmm.
I get people talking about what they're a fan of to the neighbor next to them in the conference, the meeting room. And then I ask people to share what they're a fan of. And people are fans of the coolest things, like a young woman says, I'm a fan of NASCAR. It's like, that's great. Someone else is a fan of musical comedies, which is great. Someone else is a fan of a particular sports team. That's great. And then we get to be thinking about, what are the things that make you a fan? And as a fan, are you willing to spend money with that company? And everyone raises their hand. Of course
Mm-hmm.
they are. They buy the t-shirts, they buy the the logo hats. If it's a software company, they're happy to re-up for another year. If it's an automobile manufacturer, they're happy to buy their next car in the same brand. If it's a B2B software company, they're thrilled to put it in that piece of software into more people in their company. Um, we interviewed people who are fans of their insurance company, a company called Haggerty
Mm-hmm.
Insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked people by a show of hands how many people love their insurance company. The answer is zero.
Yeah.
But Haggerty Insurance has 600,000 members of their drivers club. They do automobile insurance. So it's simply, I believe, starting with an understanding of what it is to be a fan of an organization or a brand or a company, whatever brand that or company that might be, and then giving some thought to how that particular company treats you. Are they constantly barraging you with emails asking you to buy new things? Or are they patiently waiting and offering all kinds of valuable information? So, getting back to Haggerty Insurance, which I love as an example because in my presentations, I say, okay, please raise your hand if you love auto insurance. Nobody. Yet Haggerty Insurance is the
Mm-hmm.
fastest growing automobile insurance company in the US and possibly the world. They'll grow by 200,000 customers this year. They do classic car auto insurance
Mm-hmm.
and they provide all kinds of incredibly valuable information about classic cars for the people who love classic cars.
Mm-hmm.
And so they recognize what it's like to be a fan of classic cars. And rather than say, buy my insurance, they say, here's valuable information for collectors of classic cars, a YouTube channel with 780,000 subscribers, online content about the valuations of different classic cars. Heck, they go to hundreds of classic car events around the country and they'll teach your kid how to drive your classic car so that you don't get frustrated by trying to do it yourself. And you can even renew your wedding vows in your classic car with your spouse, and Haggerty will do the ceremony and provide the bridesmaids and groomsmen and snap pictures of you. This is an insurance company
Mm-hmm.
with nearly 1 million fans.
Well, when I read the book, I was about to speak at a conference and was talking about gating some of the content. It really made me rethink it. Now, I will admit that I did go ahead and deliver that same presentation with talking about it just because it's a good tactic for getting that information. But I love the point about that's how that sets up an adversarial standpoint right at the get go. So it's
Well, there's actually a hybrid that I'm a fan of. I'm strongly convinced that in order to build fans, you need to make all kinds of valuable information
mm-hmm.
completely and totally free, especially in the top of the funnel. However, once people become
Yeah,
your fan, once they decide that your information is valuable, it's totally fine to request an email
mm-hmm.
address and say, okay, so you like this video? Please subscribe and we'll let you know any other time that we're going to produce a
Agreed.
video. Or did you like this white paper? Great. Click here to join our webinar on the same subject. Or did you like this white paper? Great. Click here for part 2 of the white paper, which you have to register for. I'm not completely against the idea of registration. I am, however, absolutely convinced, based on lots and lots of research, that initial content should be absolutely and totally free with no registration requirement whatsoever.
So let's talk about proximity for you, getting closer to your
Sure,
fans, more
sure.
closer than usual. Kind of define, unpack that, if you will.
So this idea of proximity is so important for organizations. And you asked me earlier, Shark, about this concept of, you know, how do you develop fans? And one of the things we recognized is that the things that we're a fan of, in my case, again, live going to live music shows. In my daughter's case, she loves Harry Potter. She loves to get dressed up and cosplay at Comic-Con. Yes, it's about going to Grateful Dead concerts for me. Yes, it's about live music for me. But I recognized what's even more important is the incredibly powerful human relationships that I've had with the people who do that with me, with my
Hmm.
friends who I go to live music shows with. So I'm on the board of advisors of a company called HubSpot, have been since the beginning. 12 years ago, I joined their advisory board, and I'm buddies with Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot. We've probably been to 100 live music shows together,
Wow.
100 in 12 years, including we're recording this in the very late 2019. This year alone, we went to 7 Grateful Dead concerts
Good
together, which
grief.
is ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous. So, yeah, the Grateful Dead concerts are great, but what's really, really awesome about that is that Brian and I have a group of friends that we go to shows with, and those people are among the people I'm closest to on the entire planet because we have this we share this like-minded passion. So, we actually spoke with some neuroscientists about where this passion comes from, and it's rooted in neuroscience. And it turns out that we humans are hardwired to have an emotional response to people the closer we get to them. And this is hardwired from our ancient brains, and it's related to the fight or flight mechanism, where we want to know, is the person nearby us a friend, a foe, or a possible mate? And so we can't help it. And it turns out there's zones of influence. The furthest away being 12 feet, that's called public zone. And that's people, you're kind of aware that they're out there, but you don't really pay much attention to them with your ancient brain. When people get closer than about 20 feet, they get into what's called your social zone. And our brains start to track those people. So if you walk into a room, you begin to track the people in that room. You don't even know sometimes you're doing it because you want to know, are these friends, foes, or mates?
Hmm.
And your ancient brain takes over. Now, if you feel you know somebody in that room, that's an incredibly powerful connection. And then the next zone is called the personal zone. That's 1.5 feet to 4 feet away, cocktail party distance. So if you are in a cocktail party situation, chatting with somebody who you know well, it's an incredibly powerful, positive human emotion. If you get into a crowded elevator or a crowded train, subway train in New York or something, and you're with people you don't know, that can be a negative reaction because your ancient brain takes over and says, maybe there's danger here. And so, what this means is that companies, organizations, you and me, the more we can get in close proximity with our customers or put our customers in close proximity with one another, that becomes an incredibly powerful human connection that serves to benefit us as organizations. That's why your annual meeting, if you're a company that has one, is so powerful. That's why going to conferences and events and meeting new people is incredibly powerful. So, as a tool for business, if you can put yourself in proximity with people, that's really powerful. But there's actually another point of neuroscience for organizations for whom getting in physical proximity might be difficult. Maybe you have a global market, and that is a concept, another one from neuroscience called mirror neurons. And that's the idea that when we humans see somebody do something, our brain fires in the same way as if we're doing it ourselves. So if I take a bite of a lemon, oh my gosh, that lemon is so tart. It makes my eyes close. It makes my mouth pucker up. It makes the saliva glands fire. I'm tasting that lemon incredibly strongly, and that really lights up my brain. But, Shark, I would bet that your brain was lighting up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Because through mirror neurons, when we when we see someone or hear someone experience something, it can make the same neurons in our brains fire, which is why we get happy or sad or scared in movies. So here's what that means for us to develop fans. What it means is that if you can shoot videos where you show people in close proximity with one another, or simply shoot a head and shoulders shot of you talking to your customers, that is through mirror neurons making people feel as if they're actually in close physical proximity with you. It also helps to explain the humble selfie, because a selfie, by definition, taken with somebody with their own arm, unless you're a basketball player, that means the camera is within 4 feet of your face. And that photograph makes it seem as if you're in close physical proximity in the personal zone of that particular person. And that's a really strong human connection. So that's why selfies tend to have so much social engagement on the various social networks. So any of us, you, me, anybody listening in here, can use this in cool concept of mirror neurons and physical proximity to build really fabulous connections to people, that those connections can then grow fans. And so, yeah, at the top of the show, we said, this is about human connection. And it's easy for me to say that, but it turns out when we researched this and wrote about it in the book Fanocracy, it turns out there's actually prescriptions for doing so, such as this concept of proximity and mirror neurons making virtual proximity.
So another chapter I like that, a lot of brands are now leveraging influencers, which when you started this back with the first edition New Rules of Marketing and PR, we were using influencers then. We just didn't have a cool name and an Instagram channel to blow this up into Kingdom Come. But how do you look at influencers today and how brands can leverage them to create and influence their fans?
So so-called influencer marketing has taken off recently. And I think that there's several different things that are going on. The first one is there's a lot of influencer marketing that's simply old-fashioned paid
Mm-hmm.
advertising. That's when you decide that you're going to hire one of the Kardashians to hold your product up and put it on their Instagram, and you have to pay them $1 million to do it, or whatever the model is. And then there's lots of different versions of that and different levels of celebrity where they actually pay people to talk about some product or service. And I believe, just from studying fandom, that this does not work to create massive fans. Sure, it might get a couple of sales if the Kardashians are talking about your product, but what's really valuable are true influencers who are making a choice to talk about a product or a service or an idea because they genuinely care about that product or that service or that idea. And in that case, those people are incredibly valuable. We use the word advocate, brand advocate, as opposed to influencer, although it's just semantics, doesn't really matter that much what words you use around it. And so what that means is, rather than just paying some random person to talk you up, how can you cultivate the people who already love you? How
Mm-hmm.
can you cultivate the people who are already your fans? How can you find those people who are likely to talk about you and figure out ways that you can make it easier for them to do so? And so there's a lot of different ways that you can think about this idea of influencers. Some people have formal engagements where an influencer becomes part of a community, and other people, it's more casual. But in general, we've found that changing it from an advertising model of just paying an influencer to more of a content marketing model of figuring out those people who love you, and then making ways easy for them to talk about that is a really, really great way to build fans.
Well, another group of fans and influencers that I think people continuously miss the mark on, and I thoroughly enjoyed chapter 12 because it's talking about employees who are fans.
Yes.
And I still don't think enough people understand how to motivate their employees and how important and impactful their message can be. But kind of talk a little bit about that chapter and what your viewpoint is on employee engagement and
Yeah,
developing
no,
those into fans.
of course, we found that this to be one of the most important things that you can do is have people who become your advocates who are actually your employees. We spoke with a number of different CEOs about how, number one, how important is it to have employees as advocates or whatever word you want to use for it, and then how do you find people that are willing to do this, and how do you make this happen? And it turns out that many different CEOs told us a version of the exact same thing. What they said was, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you took dozens of CEOs, they're actually saying pretty much the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
is that passion is infectious. Passion is infectious. And so CEOs told me that they hire for passion. So yeah, it's important. You look at the resume. Are they qualified? You look at the resume. Did they go to the right schools? Did they work at the right companies? And it turns out that most people, you have a job on offer, and there's 50 or 100 or 200 resumes that come in, whatever it is, and most people are qualified. And how do you weed out from the ones that are qualified? And one way to do that is to find who are the most passionate people about something, about anything, about their life, about living, about being a human being alive in this wonderful world that we live in. And so, CEOs who interview for passion have found that the people that they've hired have turned out to be unbelievably successful as a result. So, one person told us that the most important question they ask at interviews, which is a question that gets at passion, is if you were in a room with 1,000 people, what would be the one thing that you, with a high degree of confidence, would say that you are the best at, better than all 999 other people in the room? Now, the answer doesn't matter so much to what they say, but the answer to the question gets at what are you most passionate about? And so that's an interesting approach. We met with another CEO. His name is Pete Cipollone. He's a Olympic gold medal athlete, now a CEO of a company called Instavisor. He chooses to hire former Olympic athletes
Mm-hmm.
and current elite high level athletes who are training for the Olympics. And in many cases, the people who are currently training, he hires them part time. His philosophy is that anyone who's passionate enough about their sport to become an Olympic level athlete has the sort of passion that he wants in his company. And what all of these CEOs say is that that passion for something else outside of work means that they're very likely to have the kind of passion that makes them a great employee and also radiate the kind of passion for the company that's infectious, that makes people really interested in wanting to do business with that company. And HubSpot, who I mentioned earlier, HubSpot has a specific culture code around how they encourage their employees to live the passion in the way that they see fit, and they try not to impose rules on employees. As an example, there's no vacation policy at HubSpot. Basically, the vacation policy is we trust you. You're an adult. Take the time you need. We know you work on weekends sometimes, at night sometimes, maybe on a holiday. And so we're not going to tell you when you can and can't take vacation. We're not going to tell you how many weeks to take a vacation. We want you to do what you need to do. And this kind of approach for hiring passion and then letting passionate people do their jobs works really, really well.
So most people may find it hard to believe, but there is a picture of a TV in my den on your website. What's it like to have a plane be hit by a geese and then have to take an emergency landing?
It was really interesting. I was flying from Boston to New York. The plane took off about a minute into the flight. Um, I didn't hear anything, but all of a sudden the plane immediately starts to head down and it goes into a huge bank. And I knew something was going on. And the pilot comes on and says, "We are going to make an emergency landing.
Yeah,
Everything's fine." Like,
yeah,
oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
And no one panicked. We could see the plane was still flying, the engines were still on. We landed, and then the pilot comes on and said we hit a flock of geese and we had to land. And so then, and I was like, shoot, I need to get to New York. I have theater tickets. I
yeah.
want to get to New York. But I got off of the plane and I could see blood and feathers on the front of the plane. It was kind of cool. So I took a picture of it, put it on my Twitter, put it on my Instagram, and I had an unbelievably massive instant
Yeah.
reaction to that photo. And I had probably 25 different media outlets request to use it. And I was on CBS and NBC and ABC and the Weather Channel. I even made ABC
Well,
World News.
yeah, that's when I took a picture of the screen. Is when
Yeah,
you were on ABC World News. I was sitting there, and I said, "Look, there's David. I was just emailing him about something." So,
yeah, I know it's crazy. It was crazy, and that was just an illustration of if you're first, you get the attention, and everyone was looking for the photo of the plane that had
yeah.
just hit the birds, and I was the one who had the photo, and
Well,
uh,
talk about
it
an
was pretty.
industry that needs to create some fans too. So, I mean, it's just
Yeah,
amazing how beat up they get for a lot of reasons that are warranted. But I mean, when you consider how amazing the pilot and co-pilots are that save lives every day, it's just
right.
they need to read the newest rules of marketing and PR.
Yeah. Well, no, the American Airlines pilots did a great job in that
Yeah, but
particular.
so you speak a lot of events all over the world. What is a Tony Robbins event like compared to the other sales and marketing conferences you go to? It must be completely unique.
So, I speak at Tony Robbins Business Mastery events around the world. I've done between two and four every year for 5 years.
Wow.
It's an amazing, amazing experience. Tony is a fabulous human being. We've been talking about fandom for the last half
Yeah,
an hour.
exactly.
He has got so many fans. He's got millions and millions and millions of fans. And he does some things in his events that I never see anywhere else. His use of music is amazing. It's rock concert level loudness. He does another thing that I've never seen before, which is he lights the entire audience. So it's not
Hmm.
just the stage that's lit with it's television studio quality lighting of the entire audience. And then when Tony interacts with somebody in the audience, then there's multiple cameras that come in to capture the interaction. So we were talking earlier about proximity. Tony gets
Oh yeah.
himself proximity with his fans, and then by having those videos of him in proximity with his fans, other people who are in different parts of the arena who see that interaction through mirror neurons believe that they're having
Hmm.
an interaction personally with Tony Robbins. So the things does to develop fans is truly remarkable, and it's a true honor for me to be able to present on that stage. It's a highlight of my life. It's a highlight of my speaking career to be able to spend. I speak for an hour and a half. There's as many as 2,500 people. Um, and the music and the lights and the fabulous audience. And I usually go towards the end of a day, and people are tired, but they're enthusiastic, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I don't think you would find that at any other conference where half the audience is crying, the other half is hugging, you know, and then you've got a big 6'7", 6'8" man getting right in your space, but he does a better job of connecting with people than anybody I've ever seen. So, David, you're also a diver. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Ah, nice. I've never seen one in the wild, but
Really?
I would love to. No, I've never seen this particular shark in the
Okay.
wild,
Okay.
but I'd love to see a hammerhead one day
Oh,
in the
yeah.
wild. There was one time though, I was diving in Turks and Caicos, and I was right over the spot where the water depth went from
Yeah.
about 100 feet to about 3,000 feet. It was like this crazy drop off. And I was probably at 50 feet, and I was diving, and I was looking crystal clear water. I was looking straight down. I could see the bottom, which was another 50 feet below me. And then it dropped and I was looking down. So it dropped to black because all of a sudden I hit the wall, and I looked up, and there was a shark swimming right at me. And I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel scared because I knew it wasn't a great white or anything. And it was just like the coolest experience ever.
Hammerheads are great. You got to see the great hammerhead because those are massively large. I mean, they can grow up to like 20 feet as well. So they're beautiful though in the wild, as long as you don't have a cut or a Cheeto in your hand or anything. But David, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Oh, good. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Number one. As the author of The New Rules of Marketing and PR, there must be a choice: marketing or PR.
There must be a choice. Marketing.
All right, number two. It's a Super Bowl entertainment question for you, also based on where you recently came back from a trip: J-Lo or Shakira?
Shakira.
Yeah, neither one of those they're both acceptable answers. Number three. Motivational speaker, life coach, sales and marketing question: Grant Cardone or Tony Robbins?
Oh, Tony Robbins,
Exactly.
hands down.
Number
I've never
four.
met I've never met Grant,
Oh,
so
okay. Well, we'll have to 10x that one for you. So number four, Brooks and Dunn, and you had one of them do a mention on your book, or the Grateful Dead.
uh, I'm personal friends with Ronnie
Yeah,
Dunn.
I think Ronnie's going to let you say what your real passion is on this, though.
But I've only seen Brooks and Dunn once,
Yeah.
and I've seen the Grateful Dead 75 times
Oh,
and wrote a book about them. So I'm going to have to go. Ronnie, if all due respect to our friendship, I'm going to go with the Grateful Dead.
you take him to a Grateful Dead concert, and he'll be okay with that. So
I've asked him 3 times. He's agreed. So that
yeah.
we'll make happen one day.
And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread.
Cornbread, I'm afraid.
All right. Well, David, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of the book, website, follow your thoughts, and more?
Fanocracy.com for the book, Fanocracy, fanocracy.com. I'm DM Scott on the various socials, DMSCOTT, and you can always Google my name, full name, David Meerman, Meerman Scott.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
My pleasure, Shark. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So there was my conversation with David Meerman Scott, a marketing strategist, entrepreneur, advisor to emerging companies, VC strategic partner, and best-selling author of 10 books, including The New Rules of Marketing and PR, and also Fanocracy, turning fans into customers and customers into fans. And one of the coolest things in the world to me is that he also speaks at Tony Robbins' Business Mastery courses. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, I think a lot about this idea of what David calls fanocracy. I think of some of the brands that I love and some that I detest. So many of the ones that I cannot stand provide horrible service or a horrible product. But most often, they jump into sales mode without offering me anything of value that would make me want to come to them in the first place. And it's not just corporations, it's people on LinkedIn as well. You've heard me talk about this on most shows. If you want more, then customers come first. And you should be giving away some knowledge to create fans. And I do not mean just any knowledge. I'm talking content that consumers would love, not just content with your logo on it. Do you really produce anything that customers are fans of? Or are you more of a fan of simply pushing that content on them? So when you're reading Fanocracy or listening to this, think about that. Second, David says, and I quote, Giving a gift with no expectation of anything in return is a great way to build fans. Personally, I'm not a Deadhead, but David's example of the Grateful Dead, anyway, allowing people to record concerts is an interesting comparison. I really struggle with agreeing exactly on some of this because I also know how you can gate a lot of that content and increase leads and sales. So some of that is just considering whether or not that's actually creating an adversarial relationship, and I respect his opinion completely. The difference we have is not that you should or shouldn't be giving away knowledge for free. We completely agree on that. It's really just understanding that you should work on creating fans first and then deciding how much or what to give away. Regardless, we have to do a better job of creating fans of our brands. And although I'm not a Deadhead, I'm a big fan of Jerry Garcia when you're talking about Ben & Jerry's. So boom goes the cherry ice cream with cherries and fudge flakes. Third, I love when he points out something that we must recognize, which is that you or I, as a fan, seek out others who are also fans. And it's that human relationship with people who do that with me. So important when you're thinking of social, reputation, and more. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Please remember that I'm a fan of you. So have an amazing rest of your day or night or whenever your ears are listening to this. And I hope that you'll join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.